and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's November Council meeting on Monday the 29th of November 2021. And to start us this evening, I'd like to welcome Pastor Les Batchelor from the Montrose Presbyterian Church to start our meeting with prayer.
Thank you. Let's pray. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, we thank you for our nation to which we belong and for all that is good in its life. Help us to preserve our national heritage for the generation to come and make us a blessing to others. We thank you for the people of this city. Help the Mayor and Aldermen to use the authority you have entrusted to them. Help them to follow the ways of truth and justice, that we may enjoy true prosperity in this city. Give
Okay, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet this evening on the land of the Muwinina people and pay respect to Tasmania's Aboriginal people as the traditional owners and ongoing custodians of this land on which we meet, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Tonight we are holding our meeting here in council chambers, and we have a number of staff and members of the public present this evening as well. We are also live streaming to our YouTube channel and to our Facebook page. So please be aware that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed this evening. And if members of the public speak, you may appear on the video recording and audio recording. Just briefly, I note that council is a safe workplace. We take the safety of our elected representatives, our staff and members of the public very seriously here at council. So we ask this evening that we keep our discussions respectful of everybody here tonight. Maintain a safe workplace. Item 1 on our agenda this evening is apologies. We have no apologies this evening. All aldermen are present. Alderman Sims is joining us via Zoom this evening, and all other aldermen are here in the chambers this evening. Item 2, confirmation of minutes of the open meeting. I have recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on 25th of October 2021 be confirmed. Do I have someone to move?
Could I ask for an alteration to the minutes, please, Mayor?
Sure.
As I mentioned with the annual general meeting, could it be the alderman present be aldermen rather than alderman? And could also note that I was actually present in the chambers and not by video link, so if that could be altered to reflect that. Sure, appropriately.
And read alderman rather than alderman.
I'll just join everybody
You'll join
else.
the group.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby.
And I'm happy to move the minutes outside of that.
Thank you. Someone to second? Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
No. Any further discussion of the minutes? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Item 3, announcements by the Chair. I have a few positive announcements to share with you this evening. Off the back of last month's meeting, where we shared that Glenorchy had won some national awards for economic development, I'm proud to share that Glenorchy City Council has now won the 2021 Institute of Public Works Engineering Australasia Tasmania Award for Excellence in Public Works Projects for our CBD revitalisation project. Glenorchy City Council beat Hobart City Council's Salamanca Place precinct upgrade and one other project to win this award. So we're very grateful and proud of that award. Congratulations again to all of the crew involved in this project. We also our council and our community can be proud and hold our heads high after a very productive round of awards won at the Keep Australia Beautiful Tasmania Awards last week. Congratulations to all involved in the following initiatives that won certificates of recognition. Again, our CBD revitalisation project, the Glenorchy Jobs Hub, Mate, Don't Contaminate, Wasted Art School Education Program, our Family Violence Z Cards, our Piecing It Together Intergenerational Arts Project with COTA, Council on the Ageing, and our Boomerang Bags initiative. So another swag of awards for us to celebrate. And finally, Glenorchy community member Kim Smith 8 p.m, I was named the Tasmanian State recipient of the Local Hero Award at the 2022 Tasmanian Australian of the Year ceremony earlier this month. It was great to be there to celebrate Kim receiving that award. Kim retired as a police officer in 2010, and since this time, his achievements as a volunteer have been truly legendary. He oversaw the formation and management of RecLink, which organises sporting activities for street youth, as well as the Young Women's Program, mentoring teenage girls who were survivors of abuse and neglect. Also, more locally, he took on the role of L1 Learner's Licence Road Rules Tutor for the West Moona Community House. With the challenge of teaching refugees with a wide variety of English skills, Kim's solution was to develop road maps using toy cars to teach the people to drive, as well as initiating videos to demonstrate road rules in action. His idea was a huge success, and the program has received government grants with 25 videos produced in 5 languages. Over 800 people have passed through his program. A good and decent man, Kim has improved many lives in his years of dedicated service, and on behalf of council and the community, we wholeheartedly congratulate Kim. My announcements by the chair. Moving on to item 4, pecuniary interest notification. Are there any pecuniary interests this evening? Alderman Fraser.
Item 9, perceived conflict of interest, so I will abstain from voting and in the debate.
Okay, perceived conflict of interest. Item 9, noted. And Alderman Richardson.
Yes, item 13, regional sport, recreation and entertainment plan, and I would say.
Okay, 13, perceived conflict of interest, and you will abstain.
And I'll do the same for the same item there.
Okay. Noted. King. Any further pecuniary interest notifications? No. Moving on to item 5, response to previous public questions taken on notice. We have a question from James Bryan of Montrose, and the answer to those questions is included in the agenda. And some questions from Mr. Eddie Steenbergen. The questions are included in the agenda. Moving on to item 6, public question time. We allow 15 minutes for public question time, which I have the discretion to extend if necessary. We did receive some questions on notice for tonight's meeting from Mr. Eddie Steenbergen, 11 questions. He asked in relation to the Glenorchy Planning Authority. Thank you for those questions, Mr. Steenbergen, and the answers have been provided also in the agenda. Are there any further questions for public question time?
Am I allowed to have a follow-up question to Mr. Steenberg's questions?
You could ask it in questions without notice, would be the appropriate place. Is that right, General Manager, rather than public question time?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Moving on to item 7, petitions, deputations. Are there any, General Manager? No. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, announcements by the Mayor. We have a recommendation that Council receive the announcements about the activities of myself during the period from 19th of October to 19th of November. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Deputy Mayor, someone to second. Alderman Richardson. Deputy Mayor.
No, you've been busy. I was going to say girl, but that's naughty of me as usual, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the item? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. It's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 9, disposal of council land by way of long-term lease at 4 and 8 Our Corso Drive in Veridale. And we have a recommendation that council resolve under section 178 of the Local Government Act 1993 to dispose of the following council-owned land by way of long-term lease for a term of 10 years from the expiry of the current lease terms, being 4 and 8 Our Corso Drive, Veridale, and authorise the General Manager to negotiate and finalise the terms of the respective leases. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Ball. Thank you, Alderman Ball. Seconded, Deputy Mayor. Alderman Ball.
No, I'll open up for questions. I'm happy with the recommendation.
Thank you, Alderman Ball. Any discussion of the item? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, the 10-year lease, I think it gives certainty to the clubs in question, and it is always a concern to the community when they hear about disposal, but it's just a continuation of what's already there, in essence, in giving the clubs certainty and protecting them and protecting their members, and they're a valuable asset to the community, and we move on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsby.
A question, if I may, please. On behalf of a member of the community, I'm just raising a question about concerns regarding subleasing of our public land and facilities and whether it's permissible under the Local Government Act 1993 and the consultation that may be around that. Also, have aldermen received the appropriate legal advice of subleasing of public land and facilities? And as well as the exclusion of community consultation, this process is permissible under the Local Government Act 1993 prior to voting. I have taken the liberty of forwarding this particular question to the General Manager, so perhaps he can provide the advice on that particular question I'd like to see answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Yes, I have circulated the advice of our legal officer to all aldermen. And that advice is as follows. The approval to dispose of land by lease, unless explicitly further qualified, will grant an approval to give the tenant exclusive occupancy of the land. However, Council's standard lease agreement precedents prevent all further dealings with the land without the Council's consent. And this is consistent with Council's leasing and licensing policy, which at clause 13 provides lessees will not be permitted to sublease without Council's express written consent.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, General Manager. Any further discussion of the item? I'll just speak also in support of the recommendations. I've had conversations both with the Glenorchy City Bowls Club and with the Glenorchy Tennis Club in recent times, and they're very much looking forward to the opportunity to continue on with the lease and get things sorted. It means a lot in terms of being able to apply for grants and gives that certainty to enable them to give certainty to their members and develop the facilities to meet the needs of their members and of our community. So very pleased to see this come to this stage. I do note that we did receive 2 objections to the disposal of the land. I'm satisfied that they have been appropriately addressed and responded to, and the concerns as received today that Alderman Dunsby noted have also been responded to quite quickly. So thank you for that advice from our legal officer to clarify that matter. Very happy to support this and look forward to continuing to work with the Glenorchy City Bowls. I know Mr. Lee McAdams here, a long time volunteer and member at the club, and as I say, the tennis club, very much looking forward to continuing to work with them as well. So no further discussion. I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Bull.
Nothing further, thank you, Mayor.
Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand and indicate if you're for. That is Alderman Sims, Alderman Bull, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor King, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Carlton, Alderman Hickey and Alderman Sims. Did you have your hand up? Oh, I said that, didn't I already? Yep, sorry. And noting that Alderman Fraser has abstained from the vote. And the motion is carried. Moving on to item 10, closure of investigation into the disposal of council land at 137 Howard Road, Goodwood, or Goodwood Park. And we have a recommendation before us that council note the closure of investigations into the potential disposal of 137 Howard Road, Goodwood, owing to the withdrawal of Ambulance Tasmania's expression of interest in relation to this land. Do I have someone to move? Alderman Bull. Someone to second? Deputy Mayor, Alderman Bull.
Yes, I'd support the motion in view of that withdrawal of expression of interest by Ambulance Tasmania. So I'll open it to the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Alderman Bull. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. Do we have any understanding of the reason why of the withdrawal? Has another property been identified, or is the land there in particular not suitable because of its previous use?
Excuse me.
Alderman Dunsby, General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Alderman Dunsby, our understanding is that the site was deemed unsuitable as part of following investigations by the department, and so they're looking elsewhere at other sites.
Thank you.
you, Alderman Dunsby. Thank you, General Manager. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Fraser.
Just to say that this, I think this was a state government election commitment in 2018. Now, nearly 2022, and I think this is an important development for our community. I believe it would rapidly increase the response times by ambulances, which would be obviously very important to people in the community. So I certainly hope that even though this particular piece of land is deemed not suitable, that they can quickly find another piece of land and get things moving on it, because it's taking a long time.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion? Go back to the mover, Alderman Ball.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Ball. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 11, Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Grant Program. And, we have a recommendation that Council receive and note the attached report on phase 3 of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Grant Program and approve allocation of funding for the nominated projects within the grant funding of 1.157.806 million as approved by the Federal Government for Glenorchy Council for the Montrose Foreshore Skate Park funding gap, Shoebridge Park Sports Ground lighting and audio visual system replacement at KG5 and Tolosa Park Dam reintegration works, and authorise the General Manager to take the necessary steps to execute the grant approval documents. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Deputy Mayor, someone to second? Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor.
No, I'm happy to take this as read, Mayor. It's pretty straightforward what we're approving here, and the sooner we move on, the better.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to the audio-visual system replacement at KG5 Stadium in the function room. So overall, I'm very supportive of the recommendation. I can see here that the justification for that is that it is a facility that is used by many different community groups. So the benefit to the community is quite substantial in that it will improve what is available, particularly for council, so it will result in a cost saving. But I just wanted to get a bit of an understanding of if council's purchasing the upgraded equipment, what would happen with the ownership of that equipment? So where will that actually sit? Will that sit with the club or will that sit with the council?
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Director Riali.
Thank you, Mayor. The ownership will actually sit with council because council is the owner of the whole facility. However, we would expect that there would be some maintenance undertaken by the lessees of that facility. So, general servicing and cleaning, bulb replacements, those sort of things would be undertaken by the club.
And just a follow-up question, that's going to be spelled out quite clearly in the any agreement?
It will be, yes, Alderman Carlton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Riali. Any further discussion of the item? I'll speak briefly to the item to say I really appreciate this report coming to us at council. It's quite a significant funding allocation that we receive through the Local Roads and Infrastructure Program, and I appreciate the effort that council officers have gone to in identifying the projects of most importance and benefit to our community and bringing it to council for our consideration. They are all very worthy projects and things that our community has been asking for some time, so it's really pleasing that we can deliver on those projects through this funding. I note in particular interest to the communities that Tolosa Park Dam reintegration works, and I just point out that the report does note that neither the final cost nor the Tas water contribution have been confirmed yet, so we're still going through the motions to get that project to a point where we can present to the community exactly what we'll be doing there and how it will be funded, but we know that there will be a funding shortfall and we must take the opportunities we can to meet that. So I know that one's of particular interest to our community. The others are too. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations here and again thank officers for bringing it to council for endorsement. Any further discussion of the item? Over to the mover, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Alderman Carlton for the question and thank the Director for his answer and noted. Thank you. Other than that, that's good.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 12, 3 external grant requests on council land. More grants. Recommendation that council support the making of a grant application for the Glenorchy City Bowls Club for access improvements and an accessible toilet. Does not support the request from the Friends School that council apply for a grant for a new public jetty at Newtown Bay, and support the making of a grant application by the Sporting Shooters Association of Australia for the Stage 1 expansion and development of the Mitchell Shooting Range. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Fraser, someone to second. Deputy Mayor Alderman Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor. Very happy to support the recommendations. I've been out to speak with the gentleman on the day at the Glenorchy City Bowls Club to see the works that they propose out there, which is exciting new development. So I think that's a great thing for the club. I've also been to speak to the proponents of the public jetty at Newtown Bay, which officers recommend that we do not support, and I think that the reasons for not supporting that are fairly well set out, and I would, I really want to commend the council here because the level of sophistication in the way grants and new capital grants particularly are being assessed, I think is really sophisticated and is helping the council to avoid some big problems down the track. So I really commend them for that. I haven't been to speak with the Sporting Shooters, not really my scene, but I'm sure that'll be a great development as well. So yeah, very happy to support them.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion of the item? Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor, and fully appreciate and endorse Alderman Fraser's comments and again, great that we can support the Bowls Club and the Shooters. I have spoken with the Shooters and they're okay.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, and we'd love to support the Friends School proposal, but it just is a bit of a Pandora's box. It's so open-ended, unfortunately, we can't go down that track and it's too open-ended from my position to support that. So appreciate the recommendations that stand.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? I too speak in, Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor, just got in. It was really pleasing to have the full set of attachments to be able to read through each of the applications and see how officers reached their recommendation and fully supportive of the recommendation. My question was just around in the directive itself, which is the internal document. There's a section there which is on page 3 of the directive, and this is for council staff. It says applications for grants require prior approval, also refer to the table below. So obviously the grants that we are seeing are greater than 100,000, which is why they have been brought to council. But there actually just wasn't a table below. So I just wanted to see if I perhaps misread that or if that's perhaps presented differently in the document. So I just wasn't sure what it was referring to in that. So that was just a clarification question for myself. And then just this particular directive, how is that currently communicated out to the community who are looking to apply for grants? So does that actually fall under an existing policy or under a different form of communication to allow our community to understand how they can go about the process?
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. A couple of questions there, General Manager, or delegate to
Through you, Mayor, I might start with question 2. So it's an internal directive that's been prepared for the guidance of council officers, taking into account the issues around operational grants versus capital grants, and looking at the effect on council sustainability of new capital works versus recurrent capital works and maintenance and other operational items. So no, it's an internal guideline that's been prepared for staff. It's consistent with, for example, our financial strategies, which are out there in the public domain. In relation to the second question, I don't know the answer, but looking at the provisions there, I suspect that we've got that essentially A, B, C, and D appear to me to be complete, but I might just seek further clarification from the Director of Corporate Services.
I'll just have to defer to you on your assessment there as well, General Manager, as far as I can see.
Sorry.
Director Reale?
The table was not actually on the directive. When you open the directive, the information about the grant follows, and the table is actually in the in that explanation about the grant and where we put the operational cost, the ongoing maintenance costs, and that's the table being referred to.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And just a follow-up, thank you, General Manager, for that additional information. And it's quite clear that it's an internal document. And my question was more around, it was actually great to see that presented here, so the community can see what is the process that staff follow if they are looking for a grant. My question was around, is there a public-facing document that explains to sporting clubs or any sort of community organisation about the process of seeking council support? So I just wondered if that has been communicated through other policies, so that's already communicated.
Director Reale?
Thank you, Mayor. At this point in time, there's not an external facing policy document. However, with some of the projects that we're undertaking at the moment, we've had direct discussion with clubs explaining the ongoing liabilities or obligations it does create for council and what impact it may have on a club on their lease costs. So we've been in direct consultation with a number of clubs just recently to explain that.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just, I might sort of flag that for future sort of work plans, or you might consider creating some sort of document that provides that guidance before they get to discussing it with council officers and they've already applied for a grant. So just to help them, because I do get questions from time to time from sporting clubs to say, well, how do I go about approaching council? So it might be something for a future work plan or annual plan considerations.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Thank you, Director. Any further discussion of the item? I speak briefly also in support of the recommendations before us and the process that's being undertaken. I think Alderman Fraser really hit the nail on the head in the professionalism and the integrity behind the process we're using now to really assess how sustainable projects are and can be for council before we commit to taking them on and supporting clubs to take them on. So I think we've definitely come a long way in that regard, and it's going to be useful going forward. It's hard to say no sometimes, as Alderman King said. We would love to be able to support the activities of the Friends School, but clearly, as has been outlined through a thorough process, we've determined that that's not feasible at this time. So appreciate the efforts that have gone in. I look forward to supporting the grant applications for the Bowls Club. I think that will be a great improvement there, accessibility-wise, and the Sporting Shooters Association, who we've had conversations ongoing for a long time about moving that facility, and I think it's great to see us supporting the application, and let's hope they are both successful. Go back to the mover, Alderman Fraser.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, just in closing, I reiterate what you said there about particularly the proponents of the jetty at Friends School. It's actually, when I say Friends School, it's actually a group of parents who have largely dedicated a lot of time and effort to putting this together, I believe. And it would have been a lot of time and effort to do it, a lot of moving parts in that grant, I believe. So, recognise the work they've done there and perhaps encourage them to seek out a different way of solving the problem that they're facing there, and perhaps at some point come back to us with a solution that does work.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Thank you. For the recommendation to the vote, please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 13, Regional Sport, Recreation and Entertainment Hub Master Plan. We have a recommendation that council endorse the release of the draft Regional Sport, Recreation and Entertainment Hub Master Plan in the form of Attachment 1 for public exhibition and comment for approximately 7 weeks commencing in early December 2021, and note that the final Regional Sport, Recreation and Entertainment Hub Master Plan will incorporate community feedback provided during public engagement and be presented to council in early 2022. Do I have a mover?
Should we step out or? we just have to-
You've just said you're going to abstain. It's a
Yep, that's
decision
fine.
for you, but yep. So do I have someone to move the recommendation? Alderman Dunsby, and seconded Alderman Fraser. Oh, that was close. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. This is a significant document that's pulled together so many areas that have sort of sat compartmentalised, for want of a better word. Having this sitting as a master plan in one area is certainly going to enable all those organisations to work together, for us to be aware of the facilities, things where people can work together. There's so much, as much as there is in the document now, there's as much growth in that document to come in the future as well by putting it together. I look forward to hearing the comments from our public and what they've got to say and to bringing that back to us. The timing's lousy, I realise, over the holiday period, but hopefully people do take the opportunity to give us some feedback and that we get to hear that presentation back to council, hopefully at our February meeting.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby.
I'll just make a comment through you.
Yes.
So just picking up on that comment about the timing being bad, we know that this is the consultation death zone around Christmas. So the officers have extended the consultation period to 7 weeks, just to make sure that we're providing extra time, given that we know that this is a time of the year when people are busy with many things.
Thank you, General Manager.
I hope people either strike early or they come in late, but they don't miss the opportunity.
Further discussion of the item, Alderman Fraser.
I'm probably leave most of my comments until it comes back to us after it's been released to the public. But I really want to implore members of the public to take advantage of this opportunity to have their voice heard. This is a really significant and influential document, which will influence heavily how sport and recreation and entertainment develops in this city for the foreseeable future. So this is everyone's shot to really have a say. A lot of ratepayers' money is being used to develop it. So make sure that I really want members of the public to take advantage of it and make sure their voice is heard. And don't let this pass by without having something to say.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Absolutely endorse the release of the draft Regional Sport, Recreation and Entertainment Hub Master Plan. It's very exciting. It's just been great to see this come together and to see the consultation that has occurred to date. It's comprehensive, the amount of work that's gone into the document to get it to this stage, to prepare it for release, for comment. I am quite concerned, even though we do have the additional 7 weeks, I feel the date for closing, which I understand to be around the 24th of January, is not really giving the groups and associations and sections of the community time for the document to be fully reviewed and discussed at board meetings or committee meetings, which often happen monthly. So while I do appreciate the 7 weeks is an extension, I feel over Christmas, the amount of things that are happening at this time of year, closing it off on the 24th of January means a lot of the groups who are identified in the engagement plan, it's not going to have time to go to their committees or to their board meetings to have a full discussion and then provide us with their feedback. So for individuals, that might be fine, but I think if we are targeting organisations for their feedback, I do believe that for the amount of time and effort and energy that's gone into getting it to this point, we'd actually be better off seriously looking at that consultation time and actually extending that to allow those organisations to consider the information that's been put out, which will be released quite soon for them to have a look at.
Alderman Carlton, did you have a comment, General Manager?
Just suggest a comment from the director.
Yes, would you like to comment, Director Fox? I was going to ask in response, so a question for you perhaps to consider as part of your comment, in response to Alderman Carlton's concerns, whether the organisations that we are expecting to provide comment on this have already been quite heavily engaged in the process to date, is my understanding. So they would be hopefully expecting this to be coming. But yeah, I guess I put to you whether that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely, and look, it's a valid concern that we have discussed quite extensively internally, and we would have hoped to have been ready to release public consultation sooner, but we did not want to curtail those stakeholder discussions that have happened to date, and we really wanted to give those the full amount of time that they needed. Now, that said, if there is a concern, we can open this for longer if you would like. One approach might be to see how we're going and if we're getting a lot of feedback, and if we need to extend. We have in the past extended if we didn't feel that we were getting a lot of public response or buy-in. So we could either extend the date now if that's what you would like, or we could wait and see as we get closer to the end of January and see if we've got a good feedback rate, and then come back and say, well, we would like to extend, or we don't feel we need to. Totally over to you. But as the Mayor said, the conversations that we've had to date with major stakeholders in the area, Ralston, the Wilkinson's Point development and KG5, and they've been fantastic. Everyone's been very engaged. State Growth has been very engaged. We're really happy with the level of engagement, and as has been expressed, we don't want to cut off consultation and have anyone miss out. We certainly want to do the best job we can in terms of the public consultation.
Thank you, Director. Alderman Dunsby.
A question for Director through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if the opportunity to communicate as such to anybody who wants to have it, they could just say, we have an expression of interest, but the timeframe doesn't work, and if we're aware of that, and to work to the needs of that organisation, perhaps rather than extending it holus bolus for everybody might be a way to go, that, certainly entertain it if they can let you know that they do want to make some input. So, obviously we want to see it moving and progressing, but again, we don't want to stymie it. So whether that's an option, the communications might be a way to go.
Absolutely, that's Alderman Dunsby, that's a really good suggestion. One of the reasons that we have been wanting to progress this as quickly as we can is because we are moving into that potential federal election space, and we want to have something ready should the opportunity arise to seek some investment in it. As you've suggested, we certainly wouldn't want to cut anybody off. If an organisation was having a meeting 2 days after the close, we wouldn't want to say, no, sorry, your comments aren't accepted. So we can be flexible, or we can extend whatever Alderman would like to do.
Thank you, Director. Any further discussion of the item?
Just another question. With that in mind, do we need to include that into the motion, or is that something that will happen as a matter of council process? Perhaps some advice from you, General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. So, Alderman Dunsby, normally we have limited scope to move in relation to statutory processes, but this is a non-statutory process, so really the officers have a bit of discretion around extending time. So, and it's certainly something, I should say, something that we certainly do when we're providing comment to other governments, say the state government on a policy change or what have you. We routinely will say, look, we can't get it up to the council meeting until such and such a date. Can we seek an extension? So it is quite a normal thing in these, and not a problem with these non-statutory processes.
Wonderful, thank you.
And we have done it. We did it with our place-based strategy recently, I think, when we hadn't got much feedback. So I think you've heard loud and clear the concerns. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? Alderman Sims.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Just in preparation, I think it is important to note we don't want to be rushing really important work for our future just for funding. I understand it's a bit of a catch-22, and I think you're right in recommending that we time it with the federal election, but I'd really like us to do the hard yards and make sure that it's the documents got a lot of intent and meaning behind it as well. Yeah, and just also, I suppose the question is, we've done a lot of great work in getting the document developed. And it seems we have a reasonably short period over the holidays to have that finalised and fine-tuned. Have we got any measures in place to intentionally and actively go and seek this feedback from the people that have already been involved and might want to be involved?
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Director?
So to date, we've had a lot of active engagement with the stakeholders within the master plan area. That's included joint workshops as well as one-on-one follow-up interviews with them. We developed the summary pages that you see in the document, which we then provided to those those stakeholders within the precinct, and they've provided their feedback on those specific pages. And then we'll be again sending a copy of the master plan directly to those major stakeholders, and we'll be following up with a telephone conversation and seeking written feedback on the master plan overall.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Any further discussion on the item?
Not the item there, but just if we're about to vote, if Gay and I are in the room, it'll show as a no vote if we abstain. And I'm not voting against it. The fact is I've just got a conflict. So should we leave the room for the vote so that it's not shown as a negative vote?
If you'd like, if you think that's...
You've declared to close.
Through you, Mayor, so the situation is that if there's a pecuniary interest, the Act is quite clear that you would need to leave the room. If it's a non-pecuniary interest, then it is an individual decision as to how your actions might be perceived in relation to confidence in the integrity of council's decision. So it is an individual decision if it's a non-pecuniary.
I just didn't want to see it as a no vote, but that's what it would be. If we hear and we abstain, then it's deemed as a negative vote. Isn't it?
In terms of the numbers, I guess the reality is that the minutes are going to reflect for, against and abstained.
And it will say at the front that you declared an interest in that item, so that will clearly indicate that that's the reason.
If you're happy with that, then that's fine.
It will count as a negative vote in terms of the numbers, but it will be recorded in the minutes clearly as abstained. Oh, assuming that's fine.
It's a matter for you, but now's the time if you like to. But whilst you're considering, I'll speak to the item.
It worries me that it's recorded as no vote because it is an abstention.
Yeah.
So I'll leave.
No, it's recorded in the minutes. It's recorded in the minutes as an abstention, but it counts as a no. The abstention is counted with the no.
So we'll just
That's right.
Yeah.
So
According to the Act, if you abstain, it's a no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll go out.
We might get a job.
I think it's just much better to leave.
Okay.
It's much easier.
Moving on, I would like to briefly speak to the recommendation. Very pleased to see this come before us, and I know there's a significant amount of consultation that has been undertaken with the key stakeholders involved in this master plan. We are a growing municipality, and we've seen just over the last couple of weeks with the reopening of the My State Bank arena and the becoming home to the Jack Jumpers, just how much impact that level of activity has on our community, socially, economically, and in terms of transport as well. I don't know if anyone's been through that area when people are lining up to go in to the Jack Jumpers game, but clearly we need to act and be ahead of or keeping up with the growth that we are seeing in not only in our municipality in terms of housing and business activity, but also participation in sport and recreation, and the desire for more entertainment facilities out this way, and the plans for those as well. We have the the showgrounds, we have the racetrack, we have Wilkinson's Point and the MyState Bank Arena, KG5. All of these need really careful planning in order to meet the needs of our community in further developing those areas, and that's what this master plan really brings. I know the stakeholders have really appreciated the opportunity to come together and work on this as well. So, it's well overdue, and whilst I appreciate the concerns around the time frames, I do have confidence that if we as a collective promote it really well, those who are interested will have their say over that Christmas period. And I know whilst it's a time people like to have downtime, it's also perhaps a time where they do have a bit of extra time to turn their mind to such things that they wouldn't if they were not, having a break from work or whatever. So there may be some benefits to that as well. Not only the upcoming election, but the growth. We need to act on this as soon as possible to keep up with the growth that we are experiencing. So I'm supportive of getting on with it. I'll go back to the mover, who was Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. I've got nothing much to add to that. I think that the comments have been made on the table are certainly really relevant, and I think when it comes back to us, as alluded to by Alderman Fraser, is when we'll really be able to embrace it.
Excellent. I will put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously, noting that Alderman Richardson and King had left the room. We'll wait to retrieve them before we carry on.
I think I just want to
Eat all the chocolates.
No, there was none there. I moved off. I didn't take all. We couldn't
I
get
heard
the
you were
kitchen.
going out.
That's all we're going out there for. I didn't take all the food in the kitchen.
Moving on, item 14, Code of Conduct.
I had mine. Sorry.
Code of Conduct Panel Determination. We have a recommendation that Council note the General Manager's tabling in accordance with Section 28ZK4 of the Local Government Act 1993 of the Code of Conduct Panel Determination Report of a complaint made by Alderman Kelly Sims against Alderman Angela Ryan at Attachment 1, which found that Alderman Ryan had not breached the Code of Conduct and dismissed the complaint. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Ryan. Someone to second? Deputy Mayor. Alderman Ryan.
No, I have nothing to say at this stage.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Any further discussion of the item? No discussion. Alderman Ryan, back to you.
Look, I just want to put this into perspective. We have people in our community with real needs. We have people in our community with real problems. We have potholes to fill. So I think we should get back to what we were sent here to do, and that is serving the good people of Glenorchy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is Alderman Bull, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Dunsby, Alderman King, Mayor Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Fraser, Alderman Carlton and Alderman Hickey. Against? Alderman Sims. That is carried. Moving on to item 15, Draft Dog Management Policy 2022. I have a recommendation that Council receive and note the proposed updates to the Glenorchy City Council Dog Management Policy following initial consultation and engagement. Approve the release of the Draft Dog Management Policy 2022 for further community consultation, and note that the proposed dog management policy will be presented to Council for formal adoption following the conclusion of the next stage of consultation and incorporating any changes warranted as a result of further feedback received from the community. I have someone to move this recommendation, please. Alderman Richardson, the second. Alderman Bull. Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the dog management policy has been updated following consultation process. Should this recommendation be adopted, the policy will go out to public for further community consultation, and I just encourage everybody to engage with the process. We can get good feedback in order to finalise the final document.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsby.
Yeah, just a comment again, here we are going out for consultation in the dregs of the year. I do encourage people to get behind this, that the updates to it are relevant. The information that we've received from our community has been included there. So I certainly hope that we get the positive feedback that we need to be able to adopt this in the future. Okay.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Ball.
Question, if I may. This does include under the Dog Act, Part 4, about people walking their dogs. They're only allowed to walk 2 dogs at a time, where we've quite often seen 4 people with dogs off their leads. This is incorporated into this draft, isn't it?
I might defer to
Manager Community
Manager
Services.
Community, Robbie Shafe.
Don't recognise him.
Eardless.
Thank you, to Matt. This is the dog management policy, council's dog management policy, which doesn't include the what you mentioned there was state legislation. Yes. Based on the state legislation, obviously we're unable to touch the aspects of the state legislation aren't covered in the policy.
But the council does have to abide by that legislation.
Absolutely, yeah. So if there are reports of members of the public not abiding by the Dog Control Act 2000, then yes, council officers will go out and deal with those matters.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Manager. Any further discussion of the item? I'd like to speak to the item. This has been a fabulous process to go through with really quite significant engagement from our community so far through the reference group that we established. We've received really positive feedback from members of that
Time's up.
group. I'll just pause there. Is that a fire alarm or?
It's a system. Did it before, we might just have to make the call, Alderman Sims will pay the bird.
Okay, we'll just adjourn for a moment.
I can't guarantee that won't happen again. We will find out what happened, so it doesn't happen.
We've got time to get through the closed caption, so. Is it the Facebook or the?
I think it's just a connection with Alderman Sims.
When's each week for a new episode?
She's still there.
She's come back.
Just confirm we are still recording. Our live stream is still live. Yep. We'll recommence our meeting. So I think I was speaking to the item, saying about the positive consultation we've had particularly through our dog management reference group, but also through members of the public who provided their feedback on the policy to get us to this point where we are today. We received quite a significant amount of feedback in relation to the need for particular areas for greyhound exercise. We have, as we know, quite high levels of dog ownership in Glenorchy. Around 41% of households, so it's nearly half of all households have pets, have a dog, and quite a few number of them have retired greyhounds through the GAP program or other programs, and there obviously are particular criteria greyhounds need to meet in order to be exercised off lead and in particular without a muzzle, and the greyhound owners are calling out for a particular area to exercise greyhounds. So whilst provision of that's not necessarily something we can commit through to a policy, what we have proposed is through this policy to commit to investigating the provision of a greyhound specific area, as well as the other thing we heard loud and clear from our community was the need for a dog training area, so specific areas where people can go to train their dogs in good behaviour and agility exercises perhaps, without being distracted by dogs who aren't of perhaps such good behaviour. So we've whilst we're not going to regulate that, not proposing to regulate that through our policy, we're looking to commit through the draft policy to commit to investigating the options for that. So a couple of things we're really listening to our community on. It's up to all of us to promote things. When we have matters out for public consultation, we all have a role to play as elected representatives to promote these opportunities to people within our networks and the broader community through our social media channels or whatever it might be, whatever avenues we might have. So both this and the previous item we were discussing.
Did you kick that? I don't know what you're talking about.
I would hope we can all promote as a collective. We all have a role to play in getting engagement from our community on these items. But very happy to support putting this draft reviewed policy out for consultation and look forward to it coming back to us for approval next year. If there's no further, Alderman Sims.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Perhaps through the mayor, maybe to Robbie. Just in regards to those state requirements that obviously we don't oversee, is there any way to streamline that into the work we do? I mean, obviously working together with all levels of government, or to even perhaps refer to that legislation and what it might cover, so people can go to that if our policy isn't answering their questions around managing their dog?
Manager?
Yes, thank you, through you, Matt. Thank you for your question. We do have a number of educational brochures and material that we use to educate the community. And part of the policy, part of the legislation does state that the policy has to include a code of responsible dog ownership. So the policy does have that section in it. So
what is the code? Is that a state mandated code, or?
It's not a state mandated code. It's a code of the responsible dog ownership created by each council. So
and I gather they'd create that off best practice, evidence-based best practice in consultation with what's going on and the experts?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. In consultation with a number of stakeholders, Dogs Home Tasmania, RSPCA, all the dogs groups in consultation.
So I suppose my second question was, is there any way we can refer to that in the policy so people know where to go for that information that we don't cover at our level?
Yeah, that is a section of the policy itself, okay. But we will be creating other documents and brochures, posters, that kind of thing from.
I just think the reason I'm asking is I think a lot of the community get very confused around what they can do with dogs, and it actually creates quite a lot of arguments within the local neighbours and the areas where the dogs do utilise a lot. So it would be nice to have a document or a policy where we can say, here, it has all the links, and on top of that, you can have some other fluffy pamphlets that help, meet some other needs. But if we have one document where we have links to the state as well as us, it's basically a go-to place for someone to get and say, okay, I'm moving to Glenorchy and I know how to look after my dog. Yeah. I'm just wondering if we can refer that, really clearly just in that policy.
If you have a look, Alderman Sims, on page 2 of the draft policy, it's got the statutory requirements quite clearly outlined there with the links to the acts as Robbie was talking about, and then on page 6 it refers to the code of responsible dog ownership as well.
Yeah, so I had a look at it. Unfortunately, I can't at the same time as be online refer to that right now, thanks Mayor, but I have had a look at it and I appreciate that. I'm just reiterating the message of making it really clear. I know that if I look at a council or local document and then there's a link, even a web link in there to go directly to that information with the state, and it just makes it really easy and user friendly. So I just wanted to reiterate that to the director. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sims.
And just to add to that, yeah, following this process, and once we do have the policy adopted, we will be creating other educational materials for exactly that reason. Some of the feedback we have received is that the community doesn't want to be sitting and reading through a policy document, if they want nice and easy FAQ documents and posters.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the item? I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Richardson.
Nothing further.
I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand, indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 16, updated council policies. We have a recommendation that council adopt 6 policies and rescind the project management policy. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Richardson, someone to second. Alderman Fraser. Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, this is to adopt 6 council policies, rescind 1 being the project management policy due to it being superseded with the introduction of the project management office. 5 of the policies are existing and due for review with simple changes. There's 1 new policy here relating to investment of short-term funds, and I just have a couple of, no, I've got that wrong, have I?
No, you haven't.
Well, I've got a question related to that, so I've got this wrong.
Yep.
Through you, Mayor, it's actually a revision of the existing policy.
Ah, right, okay. Done.
But happy to take any
Well,
questions.
that answered my question.
Easy.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm happy to open it to the floor.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any discussion of the item? No discussion of the item? Anything to close debate then, Alderman Richardson? No?
Nothing further to add.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand, indicate if you're for. Carried unanimously. Moving on to item 17, adoption of 2022 Council and Planning Authority meeting dates. We have a recommendation that council adopt the meeting dates and times for council and the General Planning Authority, Glenorchy Planning Authority, I should say, for the 2022 calendar year, set out in the schedule in attachment 1. And note that the General Manager will ensure a public notice containing the times and places of the council meetings and Glenorchy Planning Authority meetings is published in accordance with Regulation 7.2 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015. A mover for this item. Alderman Ryan, seconded Alderman Bull. Alderman Ryan.
No, I have nothing to say. The dates are fine. There's really nothing to really talk about.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Alderman Fraser.
Question, I wonder, I know that when we first were elected in 2018, we had a big debate about when the best time of day is to have council meeting. Have we, now that we're online, I don't know if that changes, maybe that actually adds weight to having it later, I don't know. But have we has anyone revisited the timing at all? I know we had GPA at 5. Is there any reason why we don't have council meetings at 5?
Through you, Mayor. So at the when the new council is elected, each time there is generally quite a debate around the time of meetings, and there was a strong view. I'm trying to remember the times here now, but I think under the in the term of the commissioner, I think we would start on council meetings at 3 p.m. But there was a strong view from the council that we needed to start meetings at 6 o'clock to give people, those who worked, an opportunity to attend meetings. We weren't thinking of virtual meetings at that stage, but that was the strong feeling at the time. In relation to the GPA, I'm not privy to the discussion around that, but I understand that there's more, I guess, junior officer involvement in those meetings. The planning officers attend, as well as other referral officers, and I believe that there was a balancing of the involvement of those more junior officers at GPA and work-life balance. As a result, the 5 p.m. was adopted. I've just seen the director nodding, so I'm hoping I'm on solid ground there. But that's my understanding of the reason for a difference between the 5 o'clock GPA and the 6 o'clock council meeting.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a cost associated with having meetings outside normal business hours, correct? As in the human resource cost?
Probably not. Given that all of the directors and managers are on contract and are captives for the term of their natural life. So effectively, it's really so that is a reasonable comment in relation to the GPA meetings, because our staff members, junior staff members, are on the enterprise agreement and would be entitled to either time off in lieu or potentially overtime payments. But in relation to the council meetings, the directors, I was being a bit flippant, sorry everyone, the directors and managers are contract employees, and there's more flexibility around their hours of work. That's probably the more diplomatic way of putting it.
So, I mean, is it worth, as a council, given our budgetary constraints, is it worth revisiting the GPA meetings and whether it's worth having those during business hours to try and save some wage costs? Just as a thought, that's all. I put it out there.
Because that's when previously, that's when we moved to 3 o'clock, and it was then deemed that it might be harder for people, the community, to get to those meetings. So it was weighing up one against the other, particularly with planning, because more people attended those because they had an interest than actual council meetings. We see Mr. Steenberg down the back there, but council meetings, but when they were at 3, we didn't have much difference in attendance than when they were at 6. Well, we did for a little while. So, yeah, it's pros and cons.
Yeah. Alderman Dunsby?
Yeah, I've actually been thought of this quite often, that perhaps the planning authority meetings could move back earlier into the day. We talk about allowing it to be open for people to come to. We're now online, as we've mentioned, but I think that most people have an engagement with the planning authority come for a one-off reason. It's not like the general interest of a council meeting. And we do often see the staff held back to quite significant late. I think our last meeting went to 7 or 7:30 or something like that. And I'd actually see some merit in moving the planning authority one back into business hours where we can. Also for the engagement of people who bring in professionals, and they be here in their work hours as well. So I don't know how we go about that in this discussion point now, that we can consider or move it, or how that happens. I'll take advice from General Manager there.
Through you, Mayor, would simply be to reflect a change of meeting start time for the GPA meetings on the schedule. Mayor, I wonder whether it's worthwhile just getting a brief comment from the Director.
Yes, thank you. Director Fox?
The setting of the GPA start time at 5 p.m. was before I was the director, but my understanding is that it was around that balance between those staff who are on the enterprise agreement and the junior staff and who need to stay back, and also accommodating those public who might need to come. As you said, though, the GPA is attended by normally the applicant and the representative, so there's a much lower number than for council meetings, and certainly it might be something that someone attends once or twice, other than one of our regular attendees. Most people come to the GPA once or twice, they don't come every meeting. So certainly I think the staff would appreciate being able to do it more in business hours and less intrusive on their family time, and it may make it easier for us to balance those who work late at a GPA and then need to take some time off later in the week.
Thank you, Director. Alderman Sims?
Yes, look, we have had this conversation and obviously approved meeting hours since 2018, and I recall Christie attempting to change them. It might have been last year or the year before. Planning meetings. We had a very intense conversation across several workshops, all of us, about that. And some of the things that came up were getting feedback from people who had utilised the process, as well as the public, and that was that they wanted to be able to come after work. They actually felt that us changing it was stopping them and putting an intentional barrier in front of them being able to represent themselves and their communities around developments near them and that impact them. And I think our job is to serve the community, number one. I think there are lots of HR negotiations that we've already discussed and the reason we're at this situation. But I think we can negotiate, you know, for workers to come in later in the day, on the days we have planning meetings. It's not that difficult to shuffle and workforce plan for that. So I would prefer to push it out to 6 o'clock so everyone can attend if they want to after work. That would be my preference. I wouldn't be supportive of moving that back earlier in the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Any further discussion of the item?
Well,
Just one other thought would impact it may impact on the workshop schedule as well. If we had the planning authority meeting early, we may not be able to do workshops on that day, so it may impact the schedule. That's into consideration as well if we do go to a change.
Thank you, Alderman Duncan.
oh, you look at me just like. I was just going to. Well, we have two options, I guess. Can we defer this just to have a little more discussion? Or maybe defer the recommendation regarding GPA and approve the one for council meetings, or I can just move an amendment for 3 p.m. and see if it gets up.
It would have to be, you'd be moving a foreshadowed motion, so that if this motion was lost. Yep, is that right?
Alternatively, if the mover and seconder are comfortable with the amendment to allow the change.
Alderman Ryan moved and Alderman Bull seconded the recommendation.
I would be more inclined to split them and move that we accept the motion with regard to council meetings and defer the issue with regard to the GPA so that we can discuss it at a workshop or whatever.
Sounds fair.
Is there any impact on advertising or planning for 2022, Director?
I wonder whether we should lock in the dates, but not lock in the times. Just so that, because our planning timelines, as you know, we are already thinking about that January meeting, what's going to be on there. So some certainty around the dates would be useful, and the times we can work with you on.
Okay. Thank you. Executive Officer, did you have a comment?
Through you, Mayor, perhaps we could consider passing the motion in its current form. There is a requirement to advertise the dates, I think early in the new year at the latest. It might be an option to move in its current form, and then if there is a proposed change following a workshop to 3 p.m, we're simply able to run another advertisement correcting or advising of the change to those meeting times. It does result in 2 advertisements, but it would secure the dates of those meetings per Director Fox's recommendation. That's one possibility as well. It wouldn't require an amendment to the motion.
Thank you, Executive Officer. Alderman Hickey.
I'd like to see it probably stay as it is, because I'd prefer the council meetings to be moved to 5 p.m. rather than 6 as they are with the Hobart City Council. So it does work and people do attend. So I would like to see it go to a workshop early in the new year rather at this end of the year when we're all sort of a little bit brain dead, and really look at it as to what's the best outcome for the community, for the aldermen, and the best timetables, and whether or not, you know, we need to have 2 council workshops if the workload increases and 2 workshops on another alternate day, weeks, you know what I mean? So I really would like it to have a discuss, but probably not tonight. We can at least prove the dates and the times subject to a meeting later in the year, next year.
I am mindful also that this council will only be sitting until September. So whilst we are approving meeting dates for the year, it will be a discussion for the newly elected council in October to have again about times and dates. So that's something else I put in the mix. Alderman Bull.
Yes, Mayor, we are only being asked to support the dates, nothing about the time. I think that can be covered in a workshop later.
It says the dates and times.
Dates and time, doesn't it?
Dates and times for council and the Glenorchy Planning Authority.
Oh, yes, and time, sorry.
Yeah.
Correct.
Alderman Richardson?
Yes, I'd like to see this discussion deferred, because I'd like to know how, if you move the GPA times, how it's going to work in with the workshops, because we're pressed for time now.
Yep.
So how's that going to fit in?
Okay.
If I may, another question, could we also get some analysis on actually what savings it would create if we were to move to something sort of quantitative if possible? If I don't know if it's possible to do that.
So,
Question, do the staff currently get paid overtime or do they take time in lieu? What is the current situation? Sorry?
Time in lieu.
Time in lieu, so it's not, there is no difference in cost as it stands?
No.
No, okay, so that answers that question to say, okay.
And
So if they work 3 hours, do they get 3 hours off or is it like time and a half or it's just equivalent 3 hours?
It's the equivalent 3 hours, as I understand.
Thanks.
But as we said, sometimes they come in later that day and balance it. But as you would all be very much aware, our planning staff are incredibly stretched at the moment. So even finding the time off to take in lieu is difficult at the moment.
thank you, Director.
Well, could I ask the Director another question? So would moving the GPA to 3 p.m. Increase your burden or decrease it?
I think it's the same burden in that the same amount of hours need to be done, but it's about people's work-life balance and an ability to get home to their families to have dinner and to have family time in family time. So from a financial perspective, it matters little whether staff are working from 5 till 7 or they're working from 9 till 11 the following morning, where those hours come from. But in terms of staff wellbeing, we have an incredibly stretched development department at the moment, and I'm always reluctant to take people away from their families when that's their time to recover from what is a very difficult working environment at the moment. So my personal view is that I would like to see them brought earlier in the day, but I also don't want to have any members of the public who would like to attend unable to attend. We're very fortunate now to be able to live stream these meetings, and I think that's given a whole range of people the opportunity to listen in when they can't attend face to face because they've got their own family commitments as well.
Thank you, Director. Alderman Hickey.
Mayor, do I have to ask this question or can I?
You asked a question. I can't remember if you spoke to the motion. You can speak to the motion if you like.
Okay, I think we need to look big picture here, and most dynamic councils are going to have people who are working, and we don't want a council full of just retirees. That's not good future planning. So we have to consider that if someone's working, it's very difficult for them to necessarily, they might be able to get half an hour to be here by 5, but to get time during the day might be just too big an ask with travel, etc., etc. So I think we need to consider this in the new year. Not necessarily, I'm quite happy to support the motion as it is, but we have another go at it in the new year because, if this council was 50% people working for other employers, or ideally 75% of people working in another career, it just wouldn't be possible and we wouldn't get the numbers for GPA, when you've got a shortfall.
I hear your point, but the new council that is elected will set meeting times again. So
Yeah, which doesn't matter. We've still got till September.
Yeah. Any further discussion of the item? We were cruising, Simon. Okay, well, we are considering the motion as it is for now then, unless someone moves a foreshadowed motion or amendment. I will go back to the mover, Alderman Wright.
No, nothing further. We're considering the motion as is.
No one's moved an amendment or a foreshadowed motion?
Nothing further for me.
I will put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Item 18, Financial Performance Report to 31st of October 2021. We have a recommendation that Council receive and note the Financial Performance Report for the year to date ending 31st of October 2021 in the form of Attachment 1. Do I have a mover, please? I'm a bit shy tonight. Alderman Fraser, seconded Alderman Richardson. Alderman Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, it's a fairly straightforward straightforward financial report. There is some good news to report though, however, that the operating result is nearly $2.5 million better than budgeted, which is great, and that is because of the result of a 1.5 million increase in revenue and almost $1 million decrease in expenditure. So that is good news for the council, good news for the community it serves. The capital works budget, it looks bad, but there are some very good reasons why the capital works budget at this point is only $3.6 million spent for a budget of $26 billion. And that is because some fairly major projects have stalled, many of them for reasons outside of the council's control. That includes the KG5 soccer development, Jackson Street landfill, the play spaces that we had planned at Montrose and Giblins, and the Edie Street club rooms. They are still progressing, but because of those delays, the capital works budget is looking unexpended at this point. No, that's all I have to say about it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Just further to Alderman Fraser's comments, I see now that in the financial report we actually have a bit more detail about the capital works program. So that actually helps us as Aldermen to distinguish or to work out which are the actual major projects in terms of capital works and where they're at, and what is our standard capital work. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to council officers for helping us to be able to look at those two as separate capital works programs, because often we get the information, it looks like we haven't been achieving what we set out in the budget, but in actual fact, what we need to be doing, we are. It's the projects that are actually which are outside of our control, which are causing the variances. So I appreciate that information that is coming to us in a slightly different way now.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Sims.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse Alderman Carlton's comments around the level of information. And it's also great to see that both the revenue and the expenditure performed within the forecast. We should probably not be patting ourselves on the back though until we measure and evaluate the outcomes in ratio to that. So having a bit more look at things and reviewing at the end of the year on the impact we've actually had for that money, bang for buck. So I look forward to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Any further discussion of the item? Back to the move, Alderman Fraser.
No, nothing further. Thanks, Mayor.
I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Item 19, Procurement Contracts Monthly Report. We have a recommendation that Council receive and note the Procurement Contracts Monthly Report for 14th of October to 17th of November. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Ball, seconded Alderman Dunsby. Alderman Ball.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think I support the recommendation. These are items that really just a fait accompli, because that's what they have to do. So I'll open the floor for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Alderman Ball. Any discussion of the item? No? Anything to close debate? Alderman Ball.
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ball. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for the motion. That is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 20, notices of motions, questions on notice or without notice. We have a question on notice from Alderman Fraser in relation to city mowing schedules. A question on notice from Alderman Dunsby in relation to community yarns. And a question on notice from Alderman Fraser in regard to use of QR codes. The question in relation to mowing schedules, the answer is provided in the agenda paper. Same in relation to the question about community yarns. And the question on notice from Alderman Fraser in relation to use of QR codes. Do we have, General Manager, a response to that question? No.
Mayor.
Yes.
We were actually investigating some of the options that might be available. QR codes may not be the most efficient option, especially for roads. Where you have a fixed facility like a park or a building, they can work, but a road being a big linear item, it may not work. So we're looking at some of the mobile options like Snap, Send, Solve. I'm not suggesting that particular one, but there are options like that. And there's options that also work with our core digital system review. So there's some proprietary systems that you can get that link automatically to that system, take you to the website. So we are investigating a couple of those options.
Thank you, Director Riali. Do we have any further questions without notice this evening? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. Just wondering whether any consideration has been given to inviting the new governor to have a tour of our city. I know we've done that with previous governors. I'm not sure whether there's been any discussion of that at operational level or between yourself and the General Manager. If that hasn't taken place, I just wonder whether the discussions could commence, and then we do invite the governor to come and tour our city and we can show off and tell how wonderful we are.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. General Manager, is that something we've considered?
It hasn't been, but it's certainly something we can do. I know that the governor undertakes a regular program of visits to local government areas, and so we can certainly ascertain where we are on the list. The other comment I would make is that the governor has actually already done a undercover visit to Glenorchy as part of the sleep out for the salvos. So the governor and Parliament did attend the sleep out for the salvos this year and was acquainted with the challenges of homelessness in Glenorchy.
So is my question enough to initiate that? You don't need a notice for that motion. Thank you.
Into that. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further questions without notice? That's a motion. That's a motion. Yeah. Any further questions? No further questions? We'll move on to notices of motion. So we have a notice of motion from Alderman Dunsby in relation to the distribution of our Glenorchy newsletter. The motion is outlined in the agenda papers there with some options outlined in the officer's response. So, Alderman Dunsby.
Could I actually move an alternative motion?
Yep.
Just framed in light of the information that's provided in the report, the motion I'd like to suggest is that council distributes hard copies of the quarterly Our Glenorchy newsletter by unaddressed mail to all Glenorchy suburbs, with opt-in options for delivery by addressed mail or email from the newsletter's next issue, which will be the autumn 2022 edition.
Did you get that, Executive Officer?
Yes, Mayor, it's coming up on the screen.
Oh, good. Okay. That council distributes hard copies of the quarterly Our Glenorchy newsletter by unaddressed mail to all Glenorchy suburbs, with opt-in options for delivery by addressed mail or email from the newsletter's next issue. Okay, just trying to get my head around that. You'd like to move that motion, Alderman Dunsby?
Oh, good.
Do I have someone to second that, Deputy Mayor? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. We often hear and hear rumbles in our community about community engagement. I feel very strongly that this newsletter has been going out in hard copy form is the one way we've connected with all members of our community that has been going out. However, an operational decision was made to have people opt in to receive it, and so they can opt in to have it by hard copy or email, which is fine. But having discussions with the Executive Officer, very few people actually took up that option from reading the newsletter. So we're literally cutting off a wonderful form of communication with our community for the sake of saving a few dollars. As the reports outlined, there are several different methods that could be considered, and I've reframed my motion to reflect the information that was provided there, that this is middle of the range cost, but will still go out. I understand people really strongly feel about having the option of what they want. I know I personally prefer to receive things like this by email. That's my personal choice. But there are so many in our community who will not hear from us. They won't opt in. If we don't send it to them, they'll never hear from us. And this is Community Engagement 101, and the opportunity to showcase and tell them the things that are happening in their community and for them to be aware. Because the Glenorchy Gazette's not an option now. We can send them stories, but we have no control over the content of that anymore. So this is the only way that we're engaging with our community. So I feel very strongly that it remains in hard copy. I feel very strongly that people have the option to choose to opt out if they do, to choose by email if they do, but the options will be there for people. We've just seen our financials put before us, and we've seen significant increase unexpected in our budget income at the moment. The amount of money that this project is involving is quite a small amount of money, but it is so important in the way that we engage with our community. So I implore the support of my colleagues around the table that we continue to have this basic level of communication with our...
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry.
Speak up, yeah.
I thought I was speaking. So I just think it's really important that we keep this base level area and that we monitor it. We have the opportunity for people to opt in by email, which will be saving costs again, but that people maintain the opportunity to opt out rather than opt in, because we've seen that that's not working. Thank you. I'll throw it open for discussion.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion of Alderman Ryan?
I have a question. Do you really mean opt in or opt out in that motion? So what happens after autumn? What happens if you don't do anything?
You don't get it.
So the way that says no, everybody will get it as unaddressed mail, but you opt in if you want it by addressed mail or email. So it'd be going out to everybody in the unaddressed mail way. So that's where there's it's a mid-range one. The resident. To the resident. If it's unaddressed mail, it goes to all residents.
Just a clarification, Alderman Dunsby, unaddressed mail doesn't go in an envelope. It would just be a folded newsletter, which a straight post would deliver.
So you get that in your letterbox.
Yes. The option for it to go for someone to opt in by addressed mail is for people who would like to have it delivered in an envelope, and I suppose there are people potentially who have no junk mail stickers on their letterbox, or who for whatever reason would like to have it come to them directly by address mail. We would not expect that would be a large number of people, given that it's distributed.
And the address mail could potentially also incorporate people who own properties but don't live here as well, so they'd get that opportunity as well.
I don't support this as much as I've, railed against the way we do communication. A, because I think we're creating an awful lot of litter. B, if anyone has done any letterboxing, you'll see that most letterboxes, you could probably say 7 out of 10 now say no junk mail. By the time they get the newsletter, it's probably 2 months of information out of date. It's kind of fairly irrelevant. And my biggest concern is the amount of additional litter and how angry people get if you put something in their letterbox and they've clearly we don't want junk mail, and you mightn't consider it junk mail, but anything other than a bill from something that they have to pay, they consider junk mail. So I will not support this because we've been given a very thorough explanation on the cost implications of it. And it's 16.5 cents, I think it is, plus the cost of printing. And then we'd want to make sure, it wouldn't be just normal mail, because we'd have to go to environmentally friendly, recycled, compostable paper if we're going to live up to our values. So I'm sorry, but I will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Deputy Mayor.
On the opposite, I do support it because I find it's one thing that Hobart actually do well, that they have a quarterly newsletter that seems to go out, and I know a number of people that get engaged in the community by this particular newsletter, this hard copy newsletter. It's a 4-page thing that arrives in people's letterboxes, and I know a number of people that visit family members, whatnot, that's sitting on their counter at home, and they seem to be engaged by it. So I do think it's a good thing, because I think we have lost a lot of people through other forms of communication. And it may be junk to some people. It will be junk, it will be junk to some people. There's no two ways about it. He's right about that. But I do see it engages a lot of people that are otherwise disengaged.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Alderman Richardson?
Yes, I'm wondering why we'd have to do 4 newsletters. I'm in favour of 1 going out with the rate at the same time, and electronic copies following e-bulletins following that through the year.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Alderman Sims.
Hello. Yeah, I appreciate the motion being raised by an alderman. I know that in the past I was criticised for raising a motion because it wasn't led by the council officers, but I don't feel the same. I appreciate the alderman's role in raising motions and us discussing that strategically, and I think it should be welcomed and encouraged. So I do appreciate that from Alderman Dunsby. I also think the Hobart City Council's content of their newsletter is a little different, and the way they strategically communicate with their communities, it fits quite well in there and works really well. I don't think it would fit quite well with us at the moment. We'd need to move up a few levels of standard, I think, in getting outcomes around community engagement before we could just jump into those types of tools and expect them to work. I appreciate the report from the officers, but I have no recommendation from them. I haven't had a chance to weigh up everything around it and whether it's actually worth bang for buck over other options that we have in our priority list. So I won't be supporting this today, but I would like to see mechanisms of productivity being used around. If it's going to cost us not much, let's pop it in with rates notices. Maybe we can be looking at annual and strategic ways of regularly doing that in a way that is really cost effective, but also having the option there for those who really do want it, cannot access online. On a side note, we need to promote that for sustainability. We need to help drive people online. That's part of our job. But also getting back to what I was saying, still making it accessible to those who really can't and have tried and are in that demographic that we can't drive online. So making, and I know that would be a lot less envelopes and admin and resources if you're just addressing that and doing all the other work in mitigating the other issues. So that's my comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Dunsby, for bringing forward this motion. In listening to the discussion around the table, I think it fits nicely into one of the strategies that Council is currently and is going to be looking at, which is our communication strategy. So I wonder if Alderman Dunsby might consider that this particular issue, which is talks to a lot of the discussion we're having around communication with our community, whether that might be something that we could perhaps include in the actual strategy that we are developing. So I'd like to foreshadow a motion in that the recommendation that has been put forward tonight is actually included in the overall discussion around the communications strategy that's under review and development. So as Alderman Sims and other aldermen around the table have already highlighted, it's part of Council's overall communications, and we need to make sure that we're hitting all of the right channels, the right people in the right way. And I think it talks to an overall kind of problem or an overall sort of area that we are quite looking at.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Any further discussion of the item? All right, and I have a question, I guess, that's something I've been thinking about and reflecting on Alderman Dunsby's motion, which I really appreciate the intent around is, I know it's a smaller community, but on the East Coast, you go into the local IGA and they have their East Oyster Bay News on the shelf in the IGA. Is that something that we have considered, General Manager, having our newsletter available at the IGA, the local IGA, and or Claremont Village and Northgate and Glenorchy Central, the shopping centres, Moona, Moona Central Woolworths, you know, where we know people go, having it on the counter there as somewhere they know of the first Tuesday of every month or the fourth Tuesday of the fourth month every quarter. I know I can get my newsletter there. So I've been having the conversation with the Glenorchy Gazette because we are contributing some more content to the Glenorchy Gazette now, and but we know one of the reasons we withdrew from that was because we were concerned about the issues with the delivery, who it was actually reaching, and that some people in our community were telling us they weren't getting it. So I know they're putting their Gazette on the counter at Glenorchy, at Northgate Coles, for example, and suggested that they do the same at Claremont Village and around the place. So whether that's something we've considered, I'm not sure, or could consider. Do you know if that's something we've considered?
Yeah, it's something we've certainly done in the past. I can remember historically we used to use the Collinsvale shop when that existed for that purpose. But I'd need to throw to the executive officer for a comment around that.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, certainly something that has been considered and investigated. I'll come back to you with more details of some of the locations around Glenorchy where that has occurred. I know there are some businesses that do get copies of the newsletter and distribute it. For example, Time Out Cafe down the road there. I'm not sure of the street. Tony, you might be able to tell me, but they certainly distribute copies of it. It's also available at Cooper Street, thank you. It's also available at the Moona Arts Centre and I believe the Claremont Library. And I'm relatively sure that there are some other businesses around, so I'll provide some more information about that. I know we have approached some other businesses and they haven't been inclined to have the newsletter there for whatever reason. But certainly that was part of the distribution strategy, particularly when we moved to an electronic version of it, so that it would continue to be made available in hard copy to as many people as possible.
In finishing speaking to the motion, thank you for that information. I guess for, whilst I appreciate the intent, as I said, of Alderman Dunsley's motion, for everyone who has told me they appreciated getting the newsletter, I've had equally as many people say, I don't want my rates money wasted on getting this when I can read it online. So there is that balance that you weigh up of you can't please everyone. How do we reach people without excessive costs and in consideration of that balance. Alderman Fraser.
Oh, can I still get in? I was just going to ask a question about whether you mentioned the Glenorchy Gazette. I mean, would it be possible to put that as an insert inside the Glenorchy Gazette 4 times a year and piggyback on their distribution channels already?
Not without paying them, I wouldn't imagine.
But maybe it could end up being a more economical way of doing it.
Through you, Mayor, Alderman Fraser, look, it is a good suggestion. As the Mayor said, I'm sure they would be quite happy to for us to pay them for that privilege. One of the key reasons why we moved away from the Glenorchy Gazette and instead replaced that with our own newsletter was that we had concerns about the distribution level in that the Gazette was reaching at the time. So we opted initially for the hard copy delivery by address mail so that we could reach all of our ratepayers. That proved to be prohibitively expensive. We're still submitting editorial content to the Glenorchy Gazette. I'd suggest that it would probably be more beneficial for us to continue to distribute our newsletter through alternative channels so that that information is getting circulated more widely.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the current motion? We'll go back to the mover, Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you for the discussion around the table. Obviously, the first one of the financial year does go out with the rates notices, so that there is that saving that it does go in with that, and subsequent ones that happen. This is a budget item, and it has been changed operationally mid through the budget period without any consultation with us to understand where it's going. There are many people who will not opt in if they're not receiving this. They don't know that they can have that choice. These are the people I'm speaking up for, who don't have the electronic means, but that we want them to hear the good news, the information, the stuff that they need to know that's happening in our city. I just think it is really important. So this change has been made, mid-budget cycle on this, so there has been a change, and that was only advised through the newsletter. So we had it going out in hard copy. So, you know, the changes happened outside of what was the norm or what was expected. So I'm just asking for that to be reinstated, at least in the short term. Happy to have those discussions around the table if it should change or how we want to do it. But this is grassroots community engagement 101, where we tell everybody what we're doing. We've heard about the Glenorchy Gazette, how its distribution is not as complete as we would like it to be. My personal studies of that has found about 50% of people get the Gazette, and that's disappointing that it doesn't get to reach the full areas of our community as well. I'm putting this motion forward for the people who don't have access to technology, who don't know to opt out. You know, there's only about half a dozen or so people who have contacted council to say, I want to continue getting this as a result of the information in that newsletter. If people don't want to receive it, they have the option, say, I don't want to receive it anymore. They let us know, it doesn't go there. The opportunity for the community to communicate with us on what their needs are very clear with this particular model, and I'm very keen to see it be supported and that we go forward, at least with the hard copy, until there's other options that we can consider. But so for me, I want to see the very basics of this being the hard copy going to everybody in our community.
Thank you, Alderman Dunstan. We have a recommendation before us. I ask you raise your hand in support if you are for the recommendation. That is Alderman Ryan, Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor King and Alderman Fraser. Just bear with me. So that motion is lost. So we have a foreshadowed motion from Alderman Carlton, which is that we discuss the motion before us this evening as part of our communication strategy review. Happy with that wording? Alderman Carlton?
Yes, I am. Sorry, thank you. Yes.
Did you get that, Executive Officer?
I had previous wording that you'd read out at the time, which is up on the screen
great.
There, but I'm happy to change that.
No, that's okay. The recommendation put forward is included in the overall communication strategy that is under review and development. Happy with that?
I'll
You
second
that,
Yep.
Alderman Hickey. So
Same.
moved Alderman Carlton, seconded Alderman Hickey. Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. And as I spoke about earlier, I do totally support what Alderman Dunsby is saying, in that the quarterly newsletter is a really important way of communicating with people that we don't normally reach through our other channels. And I think it's something that has that level of importance that we do really need to ensure that it's incorporated into the strategy that is under review and under development, and so that we do have those discussions and incorporate the ideas that have been already raised around the table, such as what the Mayor has raised around what other channels have been considered, or what other locations, such as IGAs, the Claremont Library, the community houses. So having a look at the full range of strategies to ensure that we're able to get that newsletter out to the people who need it in hard copy and addressed mail. So I think we're able to achieve the outcome that Alderman Dunsby has spoken so passionately about tonight, but to spend that time around just making sure that we do have that workshop opportunity to really have a look at the way that we can take advantage of all of the different opportunities to get that newsletter out in hard copy. We heard Alderman Fraser talk about the Glenorchy Gazette, putting it as an insert in there. We've talked about some of the businesses in various areas. So I think it's well worth having that that workshop discussion and incorporating it into the strategy that we're developing at the moment.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Any further discussion on the motion? Alderman Hickey.
Yes, I fully support what Alderman Carlton has put forward. Communication is such a vital thing, and it might be that we have a monthly double page newsletter that's put in Chemist Warehouse and put in all of these neighbourhood houses, etc. You know, we could look at it so that it's more relevant, it's more timely, it's more full of important facts. and that's something people look forward to getting. But I just don't think you can pass something like that of that dollar value on the fly without really doing, when we've got staff doing all of this strategy work, that it's really got to be done properly and done probably, once and do it well. So I am very fully supportive of let's not rush this, but do it properly.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsby.
I'd just like to state that my notice of motion actually came out of being notified about this through the newsletter. So decisions were made at staff level where we weren't consulted. The reason I've brought it through here today. I'm very happy to see it come in as part of the strategy, but the communications have to go both ways as well. So that's the reason I brought it to the table today. I very much support that we do progress it and we don't let it languish either, that the communications continue, and look forward to the discussions sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion of the item? I too support the recommendation. I think that it is really important that we get this right, and that, as I said before, that we try and reach as many people as possible through our community without reaching those who don't want to be reached by a hard copy mechanism like a newsletter. So it's a fine balance to strike, and we need to do a bit more investigation, I feel, before we get it right. So I'm supportive of this recommendation. Back to the mover, Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman, for your contributions. And I think that in terms of the timing, it's quite a current discussion that we're having, and we've already had one workshop on the communication strategy. So I feel that it is something that we can address quite quickly, which will hopefully alleviate some of Alderman Dunsby's concerns about we need to address this. We need to make sure that we're getting that communication. We're not losing that momentum that's been achieved through the newsletter. So I do feel like that's something that I think all of us as Aldermen are quite conscious of, and really trying to make sure that we do get that communication strategy underway and completed as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. I'll put the recommendation to the vote as it reads up on the screen. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. That brings us to, unless there are any other notices without motions this evening. I think we may have one that Alderman Carlton.
No, sorry, I just there was one coming forward about.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you received that from the General Manager?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like to move it?
Yes. Okay. So just following on from tonight's AGM, there is a motion without notice, which is of two parts. The first part is, they're actually up on the screen, so I don't need to read them out. But it's acknowledging the following resolution passed at the AGM, which immediately preceded this meeting, to the effect that Glenorchy City Council urgently review suitable areas for medium density development in the city of Glenorchy and prioritise the work necessary to prepare these areas for residential development. And the second recommendation is that council direct the General Manager to prepare a report for the 20th of December 2021 Ordinary Council meeting in response to this resolution.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Do I have someone to second? Alderman Fraser. Alderman Carlton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we had a robust and rigorous and full discussion around this earlier in the evening. This does allow officers and council time to be able to give this the consideration in order for council to consider it at an appropriate meeting.
Thank you, Alderman
Carlton. This meeting wouldn't have allowed that.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Any further discussion of the item? Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That's carried unanimously. That brings us to an end, unless there are any other, I should say, are there any other notices of motion without notice? No, that brings us to an end then of our open council meeting. I have someone to move that we go to closed council. Deputy Mayor, someone second. Alderman Ball. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for the procedural motion. That's carried unanimously. That ends our open council at 7:57 p.m. Thank you to members of the public who have joined us this evening, and thank you to those of you who have joined us online. We will see you again hopefully on the 21st of December. I think it is 20th of December, Monday the 20th of December, for our final council meeting for the year with your Christmas hats on. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.